Okay, welcome back. This is going to serve as part two to our Lightworker lunar update for the Cancer new moon. Details on screen if you happen to be on the eastern seaboard of the United States. This will be the update for the Twin Flame and Divine Counterpart Collective. And boy, let me tell you, um, if you've been in your feels, you have not been the only one. So many people are just navigating like denser energy is what I'm watching people do with this new moon. And so you're not alone. Here is our new moon in Cancer. It is conjunct Mercury. We do see um, a bit of a loose square here from Saturn there in Aries. We also see a little bit of communication as well from Nessus there in Pisces. All of this is really speaking to a bit of feeling like our fingers are being held to the fire when it comes to a period of emotional review of maybe some heavier, denser emotions. We see a little compendium here, Saturn, Pallas, Vesta, Eris together in Aries, forming the square, indicative of the need to really focus on, where we may need to restructure the way we choose to show up. This is really one of those new moons. I haven't said it in a long time, but for those of you who listen to these updates because you really want to understand what's going on for me with my twin flame soulmate, divine counterpart, yada yada, fill in the blank label, I always slided in and mentioned it, how good of an idea it is to listen to the Lightworker energy update first. Because without that, you're missing what the foundational work is for yourself inside of your connection. Without that, you're missing the big picture. And when you miss the big picture, it's really easy to slide into waiting energy and not even realize you've done it. It's really easy to habituate to um, watching the other instead of preparing and adjusting and recalibrating so that you can participate in your union. So everything I say in the Lightworker Energy Update as foundation for this update, for those who have worked with me for years, when they started to listen to the Lightworker Energy Update, I did notice that their connections started to move forward. Those who only ever listened to the Twin Flame Lunar Update and tapped me on the shoulder for an annual twin flame reading while they sat in separation and continued on in loveless, sexless marriages, their connections stayed the same. They waited and watched while others participated and changed. And there's such, especially this year, there's such a huge difference because the timelines are splitting in such clear ways. So I can't force you to listen to it, but I am going to plug it right here for you in as clear language as I can. Because if third dimensional union or coming back together, reunion or marriage or partnership is indeed something that you want, a lot of the self-preparatory steps are laid out always, every new and full moon in the Lightworker energy update. Okay. So, gentle reminder, great idea to start there and then come back here. Let's take a look at what's going on with Juno, our divine feminine energy at this particular new moon. She is conjunct Pluto, who is retrograde, and there is within that a rectification of the way power works in partnership, in friend groups, in colleague groups, and in communities. There's also rectification of any hormone and reproductive health issues. There's also dealing with things we're afraid of or don't want to have to deal with here. Confrontations with power, control, manipulation, and people who operate in those roles in our life, among other things, that represents, that communication represents. This, I laid all of it out in great detail at the start of the Juno retrograde in the Sagittarius full moon lunar update. It was maybe a couple months ago. So definitely have a listen to that if you want to know the full picture of what Juno retrograde conjunct Pluto is going to bring to the table and how to work with it. Right now, Juno is preparing to take her second crossover of Pluto, marking this as one of the most defining aspects of the Juno retrograde while she is opposite Jupiter. And we're going to talk about that momentarily. She is also trying to Mars. So there's a harmonious aspect there, who is conjunct Uranus. And so we see Mars, Uranus, and Pluto all in a conversation, dancing with Juno, divine feminine energy. So this is going to, what I'm about to say next will apply to those of you who have had a counterpart who is working out their relationship to physical abuse, or you yourself are doing so as well, or verbal abuse. The aspects from Mars and Uranus as well, in Gemini, make this an important period to give each other a lot of space if you know that active triggers can lead to physical or verbal violence. I make no comment or judgment about that, and I hope our comment section is elevated enough to steer clear of judgment and pronouncements about that. Because I've certainly seen people say, "Oh, your twin would never hurt you," or if that person's hurting you, it can't be your twin. You don't know, and neither do I. Okay, people, it's not our journey, so it's not our place to comment. Just as a weather report, though, this configuration does lend itself to acting out, possessiveness, control, manipulation, aggression, and violence in partnerships. And I'm sharing this so that you can take appropriate precautions as you work toward a better place, whatever that means to you in the arena of love. That's between you and the divine. But that aside, if you are finding there are unignorable issues causing upset in connection at this time, at the root of those issues, given these three talking to Juno, there can be fear, anger, or a call to let go of something that's dead and over with, or change a pattern and change it with some immediacy and urgency. That said, who are we when those very stimulating emotions come up? Do we grip? Do we run? Are we mentally or verbally violent with ourselves or with other people? Do we physically act out with sex, with substances, or with manipulation tactics to get our way instead of facing what's unfolding and trusting we can handle it if it doesn't go the way we want to? This is the question Juno is talking to as she walks with these three in the sky. Therapy, journaling, co-counseling, or any place designed for you to just verbally get the yuck out can be very helpful if you find yourself stuck or imploding or on the verge of exploding. And for those of you who are less vocally inclined, moving your body, intense, sweaty, physical exercise will help you mitigate this transit's intensity. When we move our bodies, we can move our emotions. It is now science. Again, I want to highlight that there is divine purpose with all transits. We're never outside of the universe's benevolence. The combination of these four in communication, or Juno, divine feminine in particular, with these three, this transit is meant to be of service for those who find themselves having been doormats, those who have gone past their personal limits in the name of love, and not in a healthy, let's break down cultural norms and societal should do's kind of way, but instead in a taking that action left me exposed to harm kind of way, or I chose you over me instead of choosing love, which includes me and my well-being kind of way. If you find that you've been overly bending, overly flexible, this sort of energy between Uranus, Mars, Pluto, talking to Juno is going to cause you to feel so agitated and so irritated and so frustrated. That, and that's good. It's designed to help you come out of that position of really being subject to your connection in that way. And let me clarify what I mean by that. This is one of the many reasons, let's just zoom out of this for a second, why I constantly stress the importance of how you phrase things about what's happening with your counterpart and in your connection when you and I talk together in conversation. I've heard so many people say to me, my life blew up because of them. They opened me up. They caused my spiritual awakening, etc. And I will always interrupt you and suggest that you rephrase that to say it was my own response to love that caused me to reorganize my life. Love opened me up. I fell in love and I had a spiritual awakening because that's the actual reality of the situation. But further, when we can accurately name what's happening, we get our power back. Blaming it, even casually, conversationally, on the other person separates you from your own power. And love is actually one of the most powerful places you can move from as a creator on the planet. So to phrase what's happening in our lives in such disempowering ways prevents the connection from integrating union energy and manifesting third dimensional union. Because you can't be in union or equal partnership with anything you're a victim to. You can only ever be subject to it. So this is one of those moments with this Juno retrograde and transit over Pluto, speaking to Uranus and Mars by trine, where if you've been telling your story to yourself, you know, that this connection happened to me, as opposed to this is something I'm choosing to willingly show up for. I'm choosing to show up for love. The agitation, irritation, frustration that you may experience with this particular transit, and there's going to be multiple other opportunities of them throughout Juno's retrograde. This is going to be with us for a little while. This is your opportunity to rewrite that story, and rethink those thoughts. Tell yourself, repaint your reality in a far more empowering way. Okay. Now, again, I mentioned this in the channeled messages for this year back in April that we are crossing into a union timeline that includes all of the 3D stuff. For those who are actively clear, that's what you want, and you're choosing that pathway. And to get there, this mindset shift, it's one of many steps. The planets will show us the rest of them as we go. But this mindset shift is going to be non-negotiable. We have concluded the chapter collectively for everyone at all ages, no matter when you met your counterpart, where the driving purpose of the connection was only for your healing, only to expose your trauma. If you abandon the connection now, that's fine. You'll get to have union elsewhere if you choose that. That's also fine. No judgment. But the driving impetus in these connections going forward will be about how two people can operate in partnership in the third dimension. New rules, new ideas, new configurations, new agreements, new blueprints for actual third dimensional partnership. So, coming out of the mindset of blame, releasing the story of being subject to the connection, this is a necessary moment for many people. Some of you have already done this part. Some of you never had to do this part, but this is the divine purpose of this transit. It's to help those who need that type of help so they can stop feeling like such a victim and take their power back. And this is what I mean when I say transits like this have that divine purpose. The agitation you might feel with this transit is an activation, and it's to help us all collectively release any of those remnants of that kind of thinking and start to own our personal power more as equal partners in the connection's unfoldment. And yes, even for those who have struggled with verbal or physical violence and aggression and acting out when they're emotionally stimulated and feeling powerless, or have been on the receiving end of that, you get to have love too, and you get to rewrite your story as well. Just tread this particular transition thoughtfully and get support. Don't try to do this alone. No one is past redemption. No one is excluded from love's power to restore or heal. One of my very first channeled messages that my guides provided for me, very beginning of this YouTube channel, they wanted me to share with you all that, in the light of love, when love cracks people open, they don't become perfect beings. In fact, everything that ever needed to be healed gets exposed. It comes up, it comes out so that it can be healed, it can be loved, it can be reintegrated back into the whole. And so, I share that with a lot of compassion for those of you who find that, you know, love has triggered you to the point of destruction, like self or other or property, etc. It's a great time to get some help, get some support, get some therapy, do some reprogramming, join a support group. If you've been on the receiving end of that, again, there's a lot of support, a lot of help in the arena of communities. Juno sits in one of the signs that deals with friendships and colleagues and groups. Mars and Uranus are over here in the sign that deals with siblings, with cousins, with neighbors. I know there can be so much shame attached to having been on either side of that experience, but I really want to encourage you to know that you're not alone and to remind you that whatever we air out actually helps release some of the shame, and there are safe places to do that in communities. Okay, this is what I got on that. Needed to really tread lightly with that one. That's a really big energy here. So wanted to make sure I spoke to that with some love and some compassion for those who are on that particular journey. Juno retrograde, conjunct Pluto, also in a lovely sextile to Neptune retrograde there in Aries. This will be a bit of a taming factor. In some of the instances for the kind of transiting energy I just mentioned, Neptune can act as a release valve, but its position in Aries and trine to Jupiter can do that through self-erasure, unfortunately. And so one way that this happens is substance or behavioral abuse or addiction. But beyond substances or behaviors, we're also talking about religion and cult-like tendencies here, where we can erase self or some form of higher purpose or higher power or plan. So just be mindful of that, that the call is to actually go deeper into self-awareness and the connection of self to the divine, not the erasure of self for the divine. Because we don't get to erase self until we go back to source and we drop the body and the identity is gone at death. So, source came here to experience you as an individualized fractal of light. Enjoy that. Own that you are a self, that you have needs and you get to have needs, and that doesn't make you non-spiritual. That makes you actually a whole human being, right? And so Neptune, Pluto, Jupiter in communication with Juno is definitely speaking about a rich spiritual transformational journey. For those of you who channel, you may be receiving a lot of channeled insights and information, not only about yourself, but about your partnership and where it's headed, about your community and where you need to position yourself. For those of you who dream, this information may come in through the dream state. For those of you, who do other forms of divination, automatic writing, prayer, meditation, this is where you may find the divine finds its way to speak to you through signs and whatever your secret language is with the universe. That being said, this deeply transformational period of time, because it's very stimulating and activating, can make some of you feel quite tired. I also, again, really want to caution those of you who tend to escape with things like food or too much exercise, overdoing it at the gym, or too much work, etc. Take it easy. This energy here for both counterparts can be so stimulating that you find yourself wanting to take a break with old substances or behaviors that you have already released. And a break is a good thing. It's just about finding new ways to take that break now. Okay. So I wanted to speak to that. We also see Juno Pluto square Chiron here. Important to speak to this. This square can make things challenging when it comes to valuing the self correctly. Now, and the good news, it will blow up and amplify your stories of self-deprecation. You can fall into a period of exaggeration where even you look at your own self and hear thoughts going through your own mind and have to laugh like, okay, now I'm just being ridiculous with myself. On the other hand, a trip to low self-esteem town and your version of rock bottom may be needed before you're able to dig out with this kind of transiting energy. This square can also come with some grief and loss. The call here is to recognize that a chapter is indeed ending and the way the connection and your orientation to it was previously configured. Now, that doesn't mean the connection is over, but your previous way of operating in it or previous dynamics between you and your counterpart, behavioral dynamics, or previous narrative and timeline of the connection may very well be done. Even if you wanted the chapter to be over, like, oh, thank God we're done with that, there may be some grief here about its conclusion because that chapter had some of its own benefits. So here are some patterns I'm seeing unfold with clients that I'll share with you, just so that you can start to jog your mind in recognition of what you're seeing in your own connection. So for some, this is an end to proximity with your counterpart as you need to deal with other things in your life that build a foundation for union in the third dimension. Like you need to go deal with a health issue, you need to go deal with a money issue, you need to go deal with a housing issue. And that has meant that maybe you've enjoyed certain states of closeness, like physically on the planet with your counterpart, that now have come to a close. For others, this may be the end of the situationship era, and some of you closing out ongoing, easy but secretive or illicit access that you had to one another without deeper growth, without any development. That stage may now be over. So you could be grieving that there's less physical contact, but more honest communication about what the connection is, and more honest and congruent contact when it does happen. For others, I've seen that you may already be in some format of union, but the two of you are getting sober together. You're cleaning up financial recklessness together. Okay. And as you do these things, you're discovering things about yourself in the process that make it really challenging to be around each other right now as you deal with what was at the root of the addictive behavior or the addictive substance or the behavior with money, so that your union can be more real, more congruent, more grounded, more authentic, more honest. I've also seen those in union need to deal with, like I said, financial patterns of overspending or under earning, or just bad business practice, like years of bad business practice, like not taking ownership or accountability for their marketing or their sales, or taking ownership or accountability for the legal side of their business, and running into problems that now demand that they face certain difficult realities around inflation or economic changes, requiring them to step up in new ways, which means there is an end to one era in the connection when it comes to their resources and the way they split up time and do business that may be hard to face. They may have to learn things that, it's like, dang, I didn't want to have to do that. But I see the only way our business is going to survive and we can continue to thrive is if we deal with this, right? This sort of thing. And still for others, I'm seeing this season has marked the end of a period of working together or work in a particular way where you were professionally linked, but that professional linkage meant that there couldn't be a romantic liaison between you both. So you may be grieving seeing one another or interacting with one another regularly or talking regularly as you recalibrate to a more aligned and congruent version of your connection, where you're connected because you choose to be, not because you have to be. And so this energy has been brewing. Chiron has been coming closer and closer to the beginning of Taurus, is now here into a growing square with Pluto here in Aquarius, who's been here, since the beginning of the year, the early degrees of Aquarius. And when Chiron and Pluto are in some format of communication, there tends to be grief in the mix. There's collective grief right now across the board, worldwide, globally. But with Juno dancing with these two as she retrogrades back over Pluto and now steps back into conversation with Chiron, what this brings to the table is grief in the divine feminine energetic fields. And some of you may even find, like, for those of you who are energetically sensitive, that some of this grief that you're feeling, it's not even yours. I think a lot of you have learned some spiritual boundaries so that you don't always have to be on the receiving end of collective energies. You've figured out how to ground yourself, how to seal your auric field, how to put up, barriers of spiritual filter between yourself and the collective so that things coming your way, you're not just sitting in them. This is part of the spiritual mastery. Collectively, we were meant to be learning in the last several years. I don't teach those things, but I've certainly featured people on my channel who do teach a lot of those tools and resources. So hopefully you're utilizing those. If you notice that you are collectively sensitive, that you're not just sitting in receiving signal, you're also actively working on broadcasting signal and simultaneously your own spiritual protection as well. That's going to go a long way if you identify yourself as an empath at this time. Okay. The trick is to, first of all, understand that this is a deeper conversation about third dimensional resources that's about to kick off now with Chiron in Taurus. As Juno does this dance with Pluto here and goes back into late degrees of Capricorn, this deeper conversation about third dimensional resources and the reality of money, time, energy, physical health, all of this is meant to be a shoring up factor in our collective divine feminine energetic fields that prepare us for third dimensional union or deepened union or restructured union if you're already in one. Something that allows your union to thrive in humanity's new chapter because your physical health, your money, your housing is on stable ground for the way the industry, economy, economics, finances, jobs have all restructured. And so this period of time is a very important period of time of divine feminine energies, learning how to dance with third dimensional resources in very grounded, very real ways. Okay. So, um, a lot of this for some will also be about revaluing yourself, and it may come with some harder truths at this new moon. And as we walk into eclipse season, like, how do I value myself? Why am I valuing myself the way I'm valuing myself? Do I need to change the way I value myself and stand for it in some new ways, etc.? All of this is part of the growth here. The trick is to not make these realizations and the requisite changes harder by adding on to them self-pitying thoughts and then the behaviors we use to ameliorate self-pity when we're feeling low. Okay. So, tough truths, but necessary truths going on at this time. We also see Juno in a trine to Makemake here in Libra. Gotta love how the transiting asteroids all echo the same song the planets are singing. And in this case, that's Makemake, the great imparter of wisdom and lessons learned through a long journey in Libra, our partnership sign, saying, hey, it's really time to integrate all that you've learned and live it. Don't just let it be theory, let it be practice. We do see a square here to Haumea there in Scorpio. She's also echoing the same song. There's a lot less new beginning and creativity with her in the sign of death and retrograde. And that's going to be great because we won't be able to weasel our way out of this and onto some sort of amended version of what hasn't been working. We truly have to let go of what's not serving and step into what will serve. We see a semi-sextile from Pholus retrograde there in Capricorn. Hee hee. The catch here will be Pholus right behind Juno. That's going to make it a knee-jerk reaction to want to do the old thing, to operate off the old program, the old paradigm. And that's okay if we do. The toxicity of it will just be so loud, you'll quickly be able to self-correct and be guided into something different, okay? Lastly, I want to speak to Juno's opposition to Jupiter. They are finally coming into some format of communication. They haven't been in any format of communication for quite some time. They were in an aspect we as astrologers call the inconjunct. It's a no conversation, which means that their energy wasn't easily accessible to one another at all. Now in the opposition, it's not the best, but at least it's a conversation. This exacerbates if I'm interpreting Jupiter just as a planetary energy and not as divine masculine, it exacerbates and amplifies everything I've already said for the divine feminine energy when we assess Jupiter as the amplifier he is zodiacally and as an experience of our own inner divine masculine energy. It is a call to die to the other and be reborn to self as she faces death and transformation. Hi, Pluto. In the sign that deals with groups, communities, and colleagues. Hi, Aquarius. In and of itself. And he has just entered the sign of self-sovereignty. What up, Leo? Right there. Okay. The either or pull of an opposition tells a very specific story here where there's challenges getting on the same page with each other, but a lot more ease getting on the same page with yourself. And I feel like that's a very appropriate step given all of the activating energies unfolding in our collective divine feminine energetic fields. Those of you who identify as exclusively divine feminine, you never feel like you are divine masculine. You're going to feel what I just said even more. But those of you who are occupying a far more balanced energy at this time are going to find you have greater levity and balance walking into this new moon. Okay. Again, Jupiter has the capacity to blow like all things out of proportion um, that I already mentioned. So you can kind of move toward an extreme before settling back in the middle. And that's okay if you find yourself at an extreme place at this new moon. You will find your way back to the middle. But again, things like journaling, breath work, co-counseling, reevaluation counseling, speaking to a therapist, going to a support group, etc., really getting to the bottom of why certain things are happening for you, that's going to go a long way in utilizing this new moon's energy productively. So let's pause there before we get into what's going on for the divine masculine. And before we get into what Jupiter, the divine masculine energy, is up to at this particular new moon, I had a wonderful question come in from one of our Star Club members, and I wanted to go ahead and answer that for our community at large. She asks, Hi Kay, I've heard you talk about one person having multiple twins. A couple of months back, I met a man much younger than me. The connection felt extremely electric and currently, I don't feel anything for the man who was my first twin flame, who was older than me, 7 to 8 years. From my own intuition and a couple of readers that I work with, neither of them are best for me. Could you please talk about one person having multiple twins? It's a beautiful question. I'm so glad that you asked, and very timely as well. My guides had shown me, and this was like, gosh, like back in 2020, maybe it was 2021, in the channeled messages that I had shared that year, they had shared with me that there will be activation of new counterparts for those for whom their counterpart just, for whatever reason in this lifetime, they got in a body, they amended the agreement, they decided they're going to not come together with you. And so an activation of someone who holds, new divine counterpartship frequency can certainly come online. That's not unheard of. I think the original plan, my guides were saying, they're reminding me, no, don't think, no. The original plan is always for you and your counterpart to come into third dimensional union. It was never meant to be just this painful journey of nothing but lessons. However, once we're here on Earth, it's not always what we anticipated and what we planned. Different things happen. And so there are several transits of Uranus activating Mars, Venus, the human masculine and feminine coming up, as well as Jupiter and Juno, that will facilitate opening and realignment for available divine complementship, divine counterpartship. And I'll be walking you guys through that as we move into the remainder of 2026, 27, 28, and move toward which is the opening of this next union window. So I share that to say, can it happen? Yes. But beyond looking for a twin, my counsel has been, remains, and will always be, release the label and look for love. Pay close attention to where there is love in your heart and let that guide you. And like grab it with two fists and do not let go. That would be how I would navigate this rather than trying to figure out who's the twin, who's not the twin. Can I have more than one twin? Do I have three twins? Let go of the label. Inherent in the label, and this came through in the channeled messages I provided in 2024. Inherent in the label is so much separation consciousness. I use it for purposes of the algorithm, and so that there's like a flare or a beacon. What do they call that? Lighthouse, so that people who want to have a love activated conversation can find me online. But once you're here, it absolutely serves you to release it, because inherent in the label is so much running and chasing and never-ending loops of healing and excavation of pain and trauma. And once you finish with this lifetime, now you got to go deal with all the past lifetime. And you got to do it all before you can ever have union. Girl, drop it. It's not serving collectively any of us at this point, aside from a qualifying feature of knowing, okay, yeah, we're going to have a conversation about our lives being changed by love. And so if you don't feel like someone's right for you and you're not in love, do not force yourself to be anywhere because of a label. I would never, ever advise that. My guidance team wouldn't either. They have been explicit from the beginning about how critical it is to follow the path of love regardless of the label. Okay. And that's what I have there. Let's talk about Jupiter, what's going on with the divine masculine energy at this particular lunation. Want to get into that. We see Jupiter at this 3rd degree of Leo right here. And with Jupiter and Leo, we have finally entered a new chapter in our own inner divine masculine energy. This chapter is focused on self-reclamation after a period of learning to stay closely aligned with our emotional truth and release self-betrayal to make others feel good during Jupiter's stay in Cancer. Now that Jupiter has emerged in Leo, there's a new frequency rising that's all about self-sovereignty, self-authority, and self-creativity, a return to self, if you will. This opposition to Pluto retrograde, also conjunct Juno there in Aquarius. We interpreted it from Juno's perspective. Now let's interpret it from Jupiter's perspective. This will add into the energetic fields a sense of withdrawal from partnership as we return to self, a revisitation of the power dynamics and terms of partnership. And this will apply whether you identify in a format of union or a format of separation. This is a beautiful energy of becoming and homecoming to self. I really love to see this for us. The challenge here is recognizing that even though there is an opposition between Juno and Jupiter that clearly speaks to focusing on self and personal journey for now, it's not all or nothing. That would be the inconjunct. Instead, this is about balancing what needs attention in our individual life streams while staying connected. Teeter-totter, seesaw, this and that. Now, if that cannot be managed and extremist mindsets take hold that are more all or nothing regarding the connection, the closing of the last chapter, self-deprecation, or connection deprecation that's full of cognitive distortion, we will find that we encounter some ego death experiences, and that's okay. All roads lead back to the stabilization of self for 3rd dimensional union, even if we do take a difficult pathway there. The pendulum always comes back to the middle, no matter how far left or right we swing it. With Jupiter receiving a semi-sextile from Venus in Virgo here, ding, 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 there she is. With Venus in front of Jupiter in this position, there is a pull toward connection, toward glue, toward what we're attracted to, a pull toward harmony and receptivity. And in Virgo specifically, this is about being discerning about that. There's a pull toward figuring out what will work for us to facilitate connection and to focus on our priorities and solutions for those. Now, for now, given the other energies present in this new moon, the focus is on what brings stability, what allows us to feel acknowledged and valued for the things that we bring to the table. And like the routines, the budgets, and systems, we have how we utilize these to support ourselves in connection. Again, very similar to what we saw in the Divine Feminine's energy, but it's coming from a different place. He's receiving activation from Venus and Earth sign Virgo. She's receiving activation from Chiron in Earth sign Taurus. Both counterparts are being shown and told, look, for your union to thrive in Earth's next chapter, we got to deal with some 3rd dimensional stuff. We can't just be out here on vibes anymore. Like all the inner work, you did that. Check, 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 check. Like go over to your bank account, go over to your housing, go over to your job, go over to your business, deal with some 3rd dimensional stuff, your routines, your health, your body, deal with this now. Okay. So I like to see that sort of mirror show up between counterparts is definitely a very mirroring sort of thing, um, where there's a need to shore up the way the third dimension holds the connection, not just your heart space, not just your mind, not just your spirit, but your reality has to have room for this to evolve into its next chapter, whether you identify in union or separation. So, some small examples of this include looking to see financially, does our life actually support contribution to third dimensional union? Does our self-esteem support it? If something challenging comes along for the counterpart or for myself and I withdraw or they withdraw, are we going to take it personal, make it all about us? What do we need to shore up within ourselves and in our lives for there to be room in the third dimension for connection to stabilize? If I say, look, I really need to hunker down and focus this week, are you going to take that as rejection, right? Or this month, like I got stuff to deal with my mom, with my kid, with, the taxes and my business. I really don't have bandwidth for us to check in the way we always do. Are you going to be okay if I shore those things up, or are you going to melt down? These sorts of things, right? There's a real call for us to look at not only our own third dimension, but when somebody else needs to handle their third dimension, are we making that about us, right? So, really great time for a self check-in around some of these things. With this aspect in particular, the focus is on our service, contributions, routines, health, and well-being. Are these things aligned with who we are right now, who we're becoming, our own sovereignty? And if they aren't, how can we align them better? Do we need to change our daily routines? Do we to value ourselves better? Do we need to change, the way we're handling some of our rituals, some of our finances, etc., to handle ourselves better? Right now, as unrelated as some of those things may feel to your connection, if there's pressure on them from life right now, it's because this is the path to a stronger union. If you're already in a connection you identify as in union, or toward 3D union, if that's what you're looking for with someone known or unknown to you, there's going to be a lot of transits forthcoming to support laying down foundation, both in our divine masculine and divine feminine fields. I'm going to be talking about behaviorally what those signs are over in the Lightworker Energy Update. Make sure you're listening when I lay them out. We also see Jupiter in a square to Haumea here. Okay. And a square to Chiron in Taurus here. So now we've got these two squares are what's making a grand cross form as Jupiter opposes Juno and Pluto. The conversation escalates with Haumea and Chiron in the mix to one where we cannot ignore the wounds of the past. We also can't repeat them, even if we try, not without the fullest conversation. In Capricorn and our divine feminine energy fields, making it excessively uncomfortable as Fullest talks to Juno over there, and excessively obvious that, hey, we're going the wrong way down a one-way road. Stop, turn around. So, in that regard, there's great support for trying something new and closing out a chapter that doesn't work. Although I will be honest, it does come with some discomfort at this time. We also see a trine to Neptune in Aries for Jupiter. This is the only aspect that can add delay to the mix and shadow. There can be a bit of checking out here when the call is for more spiritual expression of self and our divine self incarnate. So this is a great thing. It's also a challenging thing. How do we do this when the pressure is high without doing a spiritual bypass and completely checking out? So meditation can help a lot here. And even if you have a form of creative self-expression, dance, play, exercise, or other pleasurable movement, belly dancing is great. All of these things can help release any pent-up desire to escape. Some sort of movement can go a long way here. And then lastly, we do see Jupiter speaking to Uranus and Mars. This is an escalation of the urgency to make changes. While this aspect appears in the divine feminine field as a threat to safety from within and without, because Pluto is part of the mix over there, and Pluto is part of the mix over here. So if you know you've got that challenge in your connection, please seek extra support at this time. But what I will say here is it appears that this is a strong and urgent push to make needed changes with some haste. While the indication is to change self and your own mindset, I know there are those who struggle with that and can try or desire to force other people to change, like so that they can feel better. And that can certainly happen if emotions escalate faster than thoughts and thoughtfulness. So it's just something to be aware of, that the pressure here is for personal growth and change. That was a heck of a whole lot. Juno and Jupiter are having a lot of intense conversations at this Cancer new moon. It is a big one. And like I've mentioned, it is part of the lead up to the eclipse season and the changes that are coming with eclipse season. It is going to be really important to maybe take some notes, listen to this a couple of times, really figure out where you personally are being asked to make some changes in the third dimension in preparation for either deeper union or greater service in your union or to have union at all. That's what I got. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for every like, share, and subscribe. You can let me know in the comments how it resonates, and I look forward to seeing you at the next full moon. Take great care and bye for now.